Hey guys, here with the TR6 today. We've got a brake issue. The master cylinder has a slow leak. It's not actually leaving anywhere that you can see it, but it is going into the brake booster. And what happens is over time the seals on the master cylinders wear out, and so it's leaking out of the back directly into the brake booster. A symptom of which, apart from the pedal going slowly to the floor, is that there's white smoke coming out of the exhaust, which can be a brake fluid leak. Now, brake boosters work on vacuum, and that vacuum is basically sucking the brake fluid into the manifold and burning it in the engine. So look for that as a symptom, especially if you see the brake pedal is not working as it should, if you're not getting the right feeling on it. That could be your issue. So today we're going to replace the master cylinder. You can rebuild these, but on a TR6 a new one's like 45 bucks, so really not worth the time. Just take it out, put in a new one you know is good. And then I'm also going to change the brake hoses. We're going to address that a little bit, and I'll show you how to bleed the brakes. We should hopefully be ready to get this car back on the road. Let's get started. The tools you're going to need are pretty simple. You need a couple of wrenches to replace the brake lines on the master cylinder, and to take the master cylinder off and then bolt it back down. And then you're obviously going to need some brake fluid. Now, I like silicone brake fluid, but if you're not doing a complete overhaul of the system, stick with the fluid that's already in the car. Silicone fluid, by the way, if you are doing an overhaul, I strongly recommend it, especially on a freshly restored car, because it won't eat the paint. The trouble is, while the fluids, technically, you could put them both in, step on the brake pedal, and you'll have pressure. What ends up happening is that they don't mix, and so traditional brake fluid absorbs moisture, and silicone brake fluid doesn't. So what ends up happening is that because they don't mix, you get slugs or pockets with the original brake fluid in there, and you get kind of severe localized rust issues in the brake system. So you really don't want that. So if you're not going to do the entire system, stick with the fluid that you already have. In this case, the car's got .3 in it. And then, of course, you're going to need some tools to bleed the brakes, plus a couple of wrenches that fit the brake hoses if you're replacing those. I don't have them out on the tool cart, but I'll show you that later. On the left, you see a bottle that's filled with brake cleaner. You'll need that, of course, to clean up any spills, plus some rags. And once you're done with those rags, make sure to throw them away, because again, brake fluid can eat paint. Okay, you see I've got some plastic down, and that's basically to catch any brake fluid as it drips down. First thing you want to do is make sure that everything's loose. Get the vacuum hose off. I like to take apart anything that isn't likely to leak brake fluid first. Make sure it's loose, but you don't necessarily want to take it off all the way yet, in case you have to apply force elsewhere. Quick note on wrenches. You want to use a specific type of wrench for removing brake lines. You'll notice this kind of curves in at the ends. You can use an ordinary wrench, but if you apply too much force and the brake lines are tight, you're going to end up rounding off the edges, and then it's going to be a pain to ever do. You're just going to end up replacing the lines. So use the correct type of wrench. Now that I can loosen those with my fingers, I'm going to finish off here. And be ready to move fast. The less brake fluid that you have dripping down, the less chance that you're going to damage your paint. I strongly recommend some kind of a covering on the fender too. Even if the brake fluid doesn't directly touch it, if you get it on your hands and lean on the fender, I mean, you've just ruined your paint job. So just be careful. With the old master cylinder off, you can actually see brake fluid right in the middle of the booster. That's definitely where the leak was coming from, out of the back of the master. Make sure that you clean that up. In some cases, you're going to end up rebuilding or replacing your booster. These are available. And the way that one way anyway that you can kind of tell whether or not that's a route that you need to go is step on the brake pedal with the engine running. If the revs change, then you know that you've got an air leak as well. If you don't, you could probably leave it for a little while. Just make sure that you're aware that you might end up changing that later. Time for the new master cylinder to go in. It'll be easier to take out these plastic plugs first. I've said this before with threads, don't force anything. If you do, it means something's not lining up correctly anyway. Here's a learning opportunity. I can't get this pipe to thread in, and the reason is, I can't get it back out either. The reason is because this is mushroomed at both ends. At the end, so it's not slipping in right away. I'm going to have to make a new brake pipe. Okay, so here's the brake pipe, and I've got it on a white background, but it might still be a little bit difficult to see. The very edges here are kind of mushroomed, and what ended up happening was somebody put in the brake line. They may have changed a master cylinder or who knows what before, but they over tightened it and it forced the edges out. So this is actually a little bit difficult to get out of the master cylinder, and it's basically impossible to go back in. Fortunately, there's no brake fluid in the master cylinder, so it's not dripping right now. I've got time to fix this problem, but I'm going to have to bend a new line and replace these fittings. If you need to, by the way, you can reuse a fitting. The one on the other end was fine, and I happen to have one spare, so rather than make a trip to the store, I'll just reuse it, but I do have to cut it off the old pipe. Let's make sure if you're going to reuse a part, make sure it's clean. Okay, now for the new pipe. The flares on these are not the correct type, and I've got a special tool for that, but you have to cut off at least one end of the old one. And make sure you have enough pipe. You could use the old one as a template, and what you want to do is kind of trace it around. Right about to there, but you also want to leave yourself a little bit of extra, because as you make the new fittings, you're going to be compressing it down a little bit. So you want to give yourself at least like another ½ inch to an inch, just so you've got some extra material on it. Before you go crazy bending it, you do need to make sure that you've got the flares on your brake lines. So we're going to start with that. The end that goes into the master cylinder. There's a number of different tools that you can use for this. With steel brake lines, you're going to need a heavier duty one. Move this over so I'm not hitting the ladder. Let's try that again. one. Some bends you're just going to have to do by hand. But be careful not to kink the pipe, or you're going to close off any ability to build pressure. And the whole time, you're basically just using the original as a copy. Like I said, don't forget the fitting. Okay, time to get our line back on. As you can see, it's threading in easily by hand now, which is exactly what you want. Get it finger tight. Bolt the master cylinder back down. When it's a new fitting, you'll feel it compressing slightly. That's normal, but don't over tighten it. There'll be plenty of time to make sure it doesn't leak.